The chandeliers glittered overhead like frozen stars, casting golden light across the grand ballroom of the Wentworth Hotel. Every corner gleamed: polished marble, polished silver, polished people in custom suits and evening gowns. But standing in the far left corner, dressed in black and white, invisible by design, was Ciara. Her back was straight, her hands gloved and clasped, her face composed in the way women learn to do when there's more at stake than just pride. She had made it her art to vanish in plain sight. She didn't belong among this crowd of millionaires and city councilmen, and she had never tried to. She didn't sip champagne or dance under chandeliers. Her role was to refill glasses and retrieve coats, wipe away fingerprints no one else noticed, and disappear before anyone said her name. But tonight was different. Tonight, the air around her felt too heavy. Her hands trembled ever so slightly every time she adjusted a wine glass. Her breath caught more than once in her throat, because no one had told her he would be here. The CEO, the man she hadn't seen in over 4 years, the man whose voice still haunted her dreams. Roy Wentworth. She caught sight of him through the crowd. His profile was unmistakable: tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a midnight blue suit that molded to his frame like it had been sewn straight from his bones. His hair was cut shorter now, more corporate, but the stubble on his jaw hadn't changed. Nor had the quiet, devastating intensity with which he looked at the world, like it was just a chessboard, and he always played 5 moves ahead. Ciara ducked her head and turned toward the kitchen doors, but it was too late. Her daughter, Hallie, had slipped out from the staff quarters. Ciara's breath seized. Hallie toddled halfway into the ballroom before Latasha, her roommate and co-worker, hurried out to gently pull her back. It happened in a blink, a few steps, a child's giggle, but Roy had seen her. He stopped mid-conversation. His gaze, so practiced in ignoring anything beneath his notice, now locked on the tiny girl being led away. He stared like he had seen a ghost, or worse, like he had seen himself. Hazel eyes, flecked with storm grey, his signature look, the same eyes that once held Ciara together during the quietest, most intimate nights of her life, and now, after all these years, threatened to rip her world apart. He turned his head slowly, finding her across the room. Ciara froze, their eyes locked. For a second, neither of them moved. The music around them didn't stop, but for her, it may as well have. The weight of that moment collapsed time. Then Roy walked toward her, cutting through the crowd like a shadow that knew exactly where it belonged. He stopped just in front of her, his voice a low, shaken whisper. Who was that little girl? Ciara's throat went dry. She didn't blink. A friend's daughter. It was too quick, too stiff, too wrong. Roy's brows furrowed. Ciara. She turned away. I have a job to finish. He followed her into the service corridor, ignoring the waiters and the buzz of dishes clinking. Don't lie to me, he said, blocking her path. I saw her face. You're mistaken. No, I'm not. She looks just like me. Ciara tried to step around him, but he caught her wrist. Gently, not forcefully. She flinched anyway. Please, he said, softer this time. Don't do this. Ciara's mouth opened, closed. Finally, she looked him in the eye and spoke the truth that had been buried for too long. Her name is Hallie, she said. She's 3 years old. Roy stepped back like she'd struck him. He leaned against the wall, one hand dragging down his face. She's mine? Ciara nodded. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was raw now, no longer the CEO tone, just a man unraveling. She clenched her jaw. You didn't stop me when I left. You didn't call. You didn't even ask. I was scared, she snapped. Yeah, me too. But I didn't get to walk away from reality. The hallway was silent except for the hum of overhead lights. Roy's voice dropped. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed, and I didn't want to ruin you. Ciara laughed bitterly. Too late. She turned and walked away. That night, back in the tiny apartment she shared with Latasha, Ciara sat curled on the couch. Hallie lay asleep across her lap, warm and breathing peacefully. She looked down at her daughter's face, the small lips, the thick lashes, the dimpled chin. She's got his mouth too, Ciara whispered. Latasha brought over a mug of herbal tea and sat beside her. You okay? Latasha asked. Ciara blinked hard. No. I knew this day would come, Latasha said gently. Then you were smarter than me. Latasha leaned back, arms crossed. He looked like a man who just saw his whole life flash by in one blink. You can't hide from that forever. I don't want to drag Hallie through drama. She's already living without her father. That's drama too. Ciara exhaled deeply. What if he tries to take her? She whispered. Then you fight. I'm tired of fighting. Then let him carry some of the weight for once. Ciara looked down at her daughter again. What if he's only here out of guilt? Or maybe, what if he came back because he remembered what real love looks like? The next morning, there was a knock on her apartment door. Ciara opened it to find Roy standing there, not in a tailored suit this time, but jeans and a hoodie. He held a small stuffed bunny in one hand, looking like he'd rehearsed this moment all night. I don't want to fight, he said. Ciara stepped aside, cautious. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of cinnamon from the tea still steeping in the kitchen. Hallie peeked out from the hallway, small and sleepy-eyed. Roy crouched down, eyes meeting hers. Hi, Hallie, he said quietly. I'm Roy. Hallie blinked. Are you a friend? I'd like to be, he replied, voice cracking just a little. Ciara knelt beside her daughter. It's okay. He just wants to say hi. Hallie looked between them, then tilted her head. Do you read bedtime stories? Roy smiled softly. I do. What's your favorite? Bunny books. He held out the stuffed rabbit. I brought this, just in case. Hallie took it, then walked over to the couch, clearly deciding she approved. Roy sat across from her, awkward at first, then slowly, something shifted. For the next hour, Ciara watched the man who once disappeared from her life fold paper airplanes with their daughter and laugh at silly cartoons. And her heart ached. She had spent years learning to protect herself from this. Now, for the first time in forever, she wondered what would happen if she stopped. That evening, Roy met up with Andre, his oldest friend, and the only person who'd ever called him out without fear of consequence. You look like hell, Andre said, sipping his whiskey. Roy swirled his drink without touching it. I think I'm in love with her. You always were. You just didn't know how to handle it. She's different now, stronger, colder. She had to be. I want to fix things. Andre leaned forward. Then don't say it. Show it. Every single day. Meanwhile, Ciara stood at the window, watching the street below. Latasha came up behind her. You still love him, she said. Ciara nodded. But I don't know if I can trust him. Latasha shrugged. Then don't trust words. Trust consistency. Over the next 2 weeks, Roy showed up. He helped with Hallie's daycare. He brought groceries. He never overstepped. And one afternoon, as they watched Hallie finger paint on the floor, Ciara whispered, You're not running? He shook his head. Not this time. She exhaled, tears welling. I was so angry at you, but mostly I was just heartbroken. I know. She asks about you now. He looked at her carefully. And what do you say? That you're trying. Roy smiled gently. Then I'll keep doing that, as long as it takes. Have you ever seen your reflection in someone you lost? If so, hit that like button and share this story with someone who still believes in forgiveness. It began with silence, the kind of quiet that only existed in rich men's homes. Ciara remembered it vividly. The soft tick of the grandfather clock, the slow hum of the AC, the hollow hush of a penthouse that was more cathedral than home. Her first morning working in Roy Wentworth's private residence had felt like stepping onto sacred ground, clean, cold, distant. She was 24, sharp but guarded, assigned as a live-in housekeeper through a high-end domestic agency. Her instructions were clear: arrive early, speak only when spoken to, and never disturb the owner unless it was urgent. It was on the third morning that something changed. She'd been dusting the library, her favorite room, though she'd never admit it out loud. The floor-to-ceiling shelves cradled books in pristine condition. But one slim volume sat open on the velvet chaise near the window, Pablo Neruda's 100 Love Sonnets. Curiosity got the better of her. She sat, just for a second, and read. I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul. The words twisted something in her chest. She didn't hear Roy enter. You like poetry? He asked. Chiara jumped to her feet, the book slipping from her lap. I'm sorry, Mr. Wentworth. I wasn't. He raised a hand. Relax. There was no malice in his tone, just surprise. I didn't expect anyone in this place to care about Neruda. Chiara froze. Roy picked up the book, thumbed through the pages. Most of my staff avoids this room. Too quiet, I guess. Chiara found her voice. It's my favorite. He looked up. Mine too. From that moment, something unspoken began to thread between them. Over the next several weeks, their interactions shifted. She would find new books stacked beside the chaise, fiction, philosophy, poetry, subtle invitations. Roy would pass by when she cleaned, not saying much, but watching longer than necessary. He asked about her favorite authors. She asked nothing in return. I don't want to cross the line, she told Latasha one night over late tea in the cramped maid quarters. Latasha raised an eyebrow. Girl, that man's line is drawn in chalk. Chiara smiled, but didn't agree. She didn't trust power, not when it came with charm, and Roy had plenty of both. But then came the storm. A freak blackout hit mid-autumn. The generator failed. The penthouse turned to shadows. Chiara had been checking candles when she heard him call out from his bedroom. His voice wasn't commanding. It was off. She knocked. Mr. Wentworth? Come in. He sat in bed, shirtless, ankle-wrapped. Sprained it. Slipped in the bathroom. She blinked. Do you need help? He nodded. I hate asking. She walked over slowly, her nerves vibrating. She'd never seen him this unguarded. He pointed to the first aid kit beside the bed. I got it out. Just can't reach. Her fingers trembled as she bandaged him. He watched her hands. Your touch is gentle, he said. She paused. I used to help my grandmother. Diabetes. He nodded, then caught her gaze. You've got kind eyes, Ciara. Her breath hitched. No one had called her by her name in weeks. When she pulled back, he gently took her hand. And then, slowly, he leaned in. The kiss was quiet fire, slow, reverent, as if asking, Are you real? She kissed him back. After that, there was no pretending. Roy invited her to stay in the guest room upstairs, an unspoken shift from staff to something else. They would talk late into the night about things he couldn't say to anyone else, his father's harsh legacy, the pressure of running an empire built on appearances, the loneliness of success. She listened. She didn't fawn or flatter. She challenged him when he was cold, comforted him when he cracked. He began to look for her before meetings, ask her to accompany him on business trips, Mexico, Vancouver, Lisbon. On a rooftop in Lisbon, wrapped in a shawl, Ciara looked at him under the stars and whispered, What are we doing? Roy didn't answer right away. I don't know, he finally said, but I don't want it to stop. That was the first time Ciara realized he didn't know how to make promises, only moments. Then came Edna. She showed up unannounced one evening while Ciara was in the kitchen, barefoot and humming to herself. Edna swept in like a storm in heels, flawless and furious. I knew it, Edna hissed, stepping into the penthouse like she still owned it. This is who you left me for. A maid. Ciara backed away, flushed. I should go. Roy appeared, jaw clenched. Edna, this isn't your place anymore. Edna's gaze slashed through Ciara. You always had a weakness for strays. Roy stepped between them. Enough. But the damage was done. Ciara packed that night. She didn't wait for him to ask her to stay. He didn't. She left with trembling hands and a cab fare in her pocket. Weeks passed. Then months. No calls. No texts. No letter at the door. She threw up on a Monday morning. Took a test by Tuesday. By Friday, her world had changed. She called her sister in another city, asked for a place to stay, got a job cleaning hotel rooms. She stopped reading Neruda. 9 months later, Hallie was born in the quiet of a charity-funded clinic. Chiara held her tiny girl to her chest and whispered, "It's just you and me now." 3 years later, Roy saw her eyes in a child, and time rewound like a thread that had never been cut. That night, after Roy's visit with Hallie, Sierra found herself curled on the same couch, alone, replaying old memories. The storm, the kiss, the rooftop in Lisbon, and the way he didn't chase her when she left. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Roy, still have that Neruda book? If not, I'll bring you another copy tomorrow. Page 89 still reminds me of you." She closed her eyes, unsure if she wanted to cry or scream. The coffee in Sierra's cup had gone cold. She sat at the kitchen table, the early morning light filtering through the blinds in pale ribbons. Hallie was still asleep, curled in her favorite blanket on the couch. In the soft hush of dawn, Sierra should have felt peace. But the message Roy sent the night before haunted her. Still have that Neruda book? It was like he had reached inside her chest and touched the exact scar she'd spent years burying. She didn't reply, not because she didn't want to, but because if she started talking to Roy again, really talking, she wasn't sure she'd be able to stop. Later that morning, she slipped into her black work dress, pulled her hair into a bun, and took Hallie to daycare. She had barely arrived at the hotel when Latasha caught up with her near the back hallway. "Girl," Latasha whispered, eyes wide. "Guess who just pulled up in a damn chauffeured Maybach?" Chiara blinked. "No." Latasha nodded, grinning. "Yes. King Roy himself." Chiara shook her head. "He shouldn't be here. He's already inside." Roy stood in the private lounge on the 18th floor, dressed in a casual grey sweater and dress pants, holding a steaming espresso like he had all the time in the world. Chiara found him near the window, staring out over the skyline. "Do you always ambush women at their jobs?" she said quietly. He turned. His smile was warm but tentative. "Only the ones I shouldn't have let go." Chiara rolled her eyes and turned to leave. "Wait," he said. "Just 5 minutes. Please." She hesitated, then slowly walked back. Roy set down his cup. "I didn't know what to say after you left, and by the time I figured it out, I assumed you wouldn't want to hear from me. You assumed right. But I thought about you. All the time." She folded her arms. "And that's supposed to fix what you broke." "No, but maybe it can build something new." Sierra looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the same man. Not entirely. There was a gentleness in him now that hadn't existed before. "I'm not who I was either," she said softly. "Good," he replied. "Maybe we don't need to pick up where we left off. Maybe we start fresh." Chiara studied him, then said, "One condition, anything. You don't get to disappear again." Over the next few days, Roy kept showing up, but not in grand, performative ways. He brought lunch for the hotel staff. He read to the kids at Hallie's daycare. He even helped clean up after one of their events. "I can't believe Mr. Rich and Royal is wiping tables," Latasha joked. Tiara smiled, but said nothing. She wasn't sure if she was witnessing real change or temporary guilt. One night, after Hallie had gone to sleep, Roy knocked softly at Sierra's door. "I know it's late," he said, "but I just wanted to talk." She hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat on the couch, close but not touching. "I keep thinking about what you said," he murmured. "What part?" "That I didn't stop you." Silence stretched between them. "I think—" "Back then, I was afraid of how real it all felt," Roy admitted. "You weren't like anyone I'd known. You didn't care about the money or the parties. You saw me, and that terrified me." Tiara stared at the floor. "So you let me leave. I regret it every day." He reached into his coat and pulled out a copy of 100 love sonnets. He placed it on the table in front of her. "Page 89, he said softly. "That's the page I always remembered." She opened it. "Read, I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you straightforwardly, without complexities or pride. So I love you because I know no other way." Tiara's eyes blurred. Roy reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I want to know Hallie, and I want to earn my place, both in her life and in yours. Tiara swallowed. You don't just get to walk in and fix everything with poetry. I know. That's why I'm here, every day. Until I do it with actions. But not everyone was happy. Edna was furious. She hadn't heard from Roy in weeks. No calls, no dinners, no late-night flirtations. She stormed into the Wentworth Enterprises building like a thundercloud in heels. Andre met her in the lobby. You're not on the schedule, he said flatly. Then get me on it. Andre gave her a knowing look. He's moved on, Edna. With the maid? She spat. Are you kidding me? Andre tilted his head. She's more than you ever were to him. Edna's lips curled into a sneer. He thinks a child and some hand-me-down feelings are enough to rebuild what he broke? Fine, let him try. But don't come crying when she ruins him. That night, Roy got a text from an unknown number. A photo. It was Hallie, at daycare. Below it, cute kid. Would be a shame if the press knew the CEO was hiding a secret daughter with hotel staff. His stomach dropped. He called Kiara immediately. Where's Hallie right now? She's here, with me. Why? Lock the door. I'm coming over. He arrived in minutes. Kiara opened the door, panicked. Roy, what's going on? He showed her the message. Her knees went weak. This is Edna, she whispered. It has to be. Roy pulled out his phone and called Andre. I need security on Ciara and Hallie. Tonight. For the next few days, tension thickened. Roy moved Tiara and Hallie to a temporary private apartment under alias names. Latasha helped them pack. Security detail followed them discreetly. Tiara felt trapped in a gilded cage again, but this time she wasn't alone. Roy stayed, held Hallie when she cried about missing her toys, cooked dinner with Ciara, watched old movies on the couch until dawn. In one of the quieter moments, she looked at him and said, Why are you doing all this? He smiled. Because I'm tired of being the man who failed you. One afternoon, while Roy was out, Ciara got an envelope slid under the door. Inside, legal documents. Petition for shared custody. Roy Wentworth. Her world tilted. I knew it, she whispered, tears gathering. He's trying to take her. She collapsed onto the floor, gasping. Hallie ran into the room. Mummy? You okay? Tiara wrapped her daughter in a tight embrace, heart-shattering. That evening, when Roy returned, she met him at the door. How dare you? She said, voice shaking. After everything, this is how you repay me. He blinked, confused. What are you talking about? She held up the custody documents. You lied. He frowned. I sent those. But, did you read the note? She froze. What note? He pulled the page from the folder. On it, handwritten. I'm filing this not to take her, but to protect her. I want to make sure no one can ever come between us again. I want this to be ours, not mine. Tiara read the note, twice. She sank onto the couch, breathless. I'm not taking her from you, Roy said softly. I'm giving her a future, with both of us in it. Ciara hadn't known how quiet a hospital room could be until the night Hallie was born. No cries, no visitors, no excited chatter in the hallway, just the distant beep of machines, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes, and the pounding in her own chest. She lay on the stiff, narrow bed of the public clinic, her arms curled protectively around the tiny baby resting on her chest. Hallie's skin was soft, warm, and impossibly small. Her breath came in short little huffs, her fingers twitching with life. Tiara had never felt so full and so empty at the same time. She whispered, I've got you. Even if no one else ever does. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Alone, forgotten, undone. Roy should have been there, but she had walked away, and he hadn't followed. Flashback, 6 months earlier. She had taken the test in Latasha's tiny apartment. The second line had appeared instantly, bright, bold, undeniable. She had sat in silence for nearly an hour. Latasha came home and found her there, still gripping the stick like it might erase itself if she waited long enough. "Oh, girl," Latasha said gently, sinking onto the couch beside her. "It's his." Tiara nodded. "You gonna tell him?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Does it matter?" Latasha tilted her head. "What do you want to do?" Tiara had laughed through her tears. "I want to be angry, but mostly I just want to be strong." She found a job cleaning at a downtown boutique hotel. The hours were long but flexible. The pay was terrible but consistent. When her belly started to show, guests began to whisper. Managers gave her pitying glances, but she never explained. She didn't owe anyone her story. She kept working up until the contractions started. The delivery was long, complicated. There was a moment when the nurse pressed the red button and shouted for help, and Sierra felt her body slipping, like a tide pulling her away from the shore. She remembered thinking, "I might die, alone." But then, Hallie cried, loud, strong, and Sierra opened her eyes to see her daughter, alive, real, whole. Over the next few years, she rebuilt her life in pieces. She moved into a shared apartment with Latasha. She bought second-hand clothes and learned to cook meals that lasted 3 days. She found a daycare that let her clean on weekends in exchange for discounted tuition. She didn't have time to feel sorry for herself. Her daughter needed her, and that was enough. Except, some nights, when Hallie was asleep, Tiara would sit on the edge of the couch and whisper his name. Roy. Not out of longing, but out of grief. The kind of grief you feel for someone who is alive, but no longer yours. There were birthdays with no balloons, Christmases where the only gift was a homemade storybook. But Hallie never complained. She had her mother, and she had love. And Sierra? She had built strength the hard way, through tears and grit, through exhaustion and quiet victories no one ever saw. Still, there were questions. "Mummy, how come I don't have a daddy like Ava?" Tiara would smile softly and say, "Because sometimes the people we love don't know how to stay." "Will he come back?" "I don't know." And when Hallie would look up at her with those big hazel eyes, storm-grey flecks gleaming, Sierra would whisper to herself, "How could he not know? How could he not feel it?" One Sunday afternoon, after a long shift at the hotel, Sierra and Hallie took the bus to the city park. They sat under an oak tree, sharing melted ice cream. A couple walked by, man, woman, 2 kids holding hands, laughing, spinning in the grass. Tiara tried not to watch, but Hallie pointed. "That's a happy family." Tiara smiled. "They sure are. Do we look like that?" Tiara hesitated. "We look different, but we're still happy." Hallie blinked. "Are you happy, Mummy?" Tiara's heart twisted. "I'm learning how to be." It wasn't until Hallie turned 3 that the past started clawing its way back. Sierra had started working part-time for a new luxury venue, an upscale ballroom attached to a hotel owned by the Wentworth family. She didn't even realize the connection at first. She just needed the extra shifts. The job was temporary, seasonal, but when she walked into the ornate lobby and saw the initials RW carved into the marble reception desk, her heart stuttered. She stood there for a full minute, unsure if she should walk right back out. She stayed, because Bills didn't care about ghosts. That night, she came home and stared at herself in the mirror. Same brown eyes, same full lips, same tired shoulders, but her skin felt heavier, like it had absorbed too many memories she hadn't consented to relive. Latasha noticed something was off. "You saw something?" she asked, handing over tea. Tiara nodded. "I'm working at one of the Wentworth properties." Latasha paused. "Does he know?" "No, and I plan to keep it that way." "You sure that's possible?" "No," Tiara said, "but I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for her." Weeks passed. She stayed in the shadows, did her job, avoided attention, until the gala, until the moment Hallie slipped through a kitchen door, and time collapsed. Now, days later, Sierra sat by the window of their temporary apartment, the one Roy had arranged for them to hide in after Edna's threat. Hallie was asleep in the next room. Tiara stared at the copy of 100 Love Sonnets on the table. She picked it up, flipped to page 89, ran her fingers over the words she once read aloud to Roy in a Lisbon hotel room. I love you without knowing how. She closed the book, leaned back. She had built an entire life out of silence, carried pain like armor, taught herself how to survive without the one person who once made her feel weightless. But maybe, just maybe, she was tired of surviving. Maybe it was time to start living. Roy never forgot the look in Sierra's eyes that night in the ballroom hallway. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was defiance. A fire built from years of silence, from loving in secret, from walking away without answers. A fire he had helped light. And now, standing outside her apartment door, his phone clenched in one hand, he was about to walk through it. He knocked softly. Tiara opened the door, dressed in a pale blue shirt and cotton pants, her curls tied up loosely. Her face was guarded, her body still. She didn't say a word. Roy held up the copy of Goodnight Moon. She asked for a story. Tiara exhaled and stepped aside. Hallie was sitting on the rug, stacking blocks. Her cheeks dimpled when she saw him. Hi, Roy, she squealed, as though she'd known him all her life. He froze in the doorway. Her voice, it sounded like Kiara's, but the smile, that was his. Hi, sweetheart, he replied, kneeling. Can I join? She nodded enthusiastically. We're building a bunny house. He helped her stack blocks, crooked rainbow-colored towers, and tried not to cry. Tiara stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching him like he was a wild animal she had to keep an eye on. He turned his head toward her. She's incredible. Tiara nodded, but said nothing. Later, after Hallie was tucked into bed with the book he'd read twice, by request, Roy walked out to the small living room where Sierra sat on the couch, sipping ginger tea. She's bright, he said. She's brilliant, Sierra replied, not smiling. They sat in silence for a moment. Roy turned to her. How did I miss it? How did I not see it? You weren't looking, she answered. His jaw tightened. I should have called. I should have gone after you. Yes, you should have. I was afraid. So was I. But I didn't get the luxury of walking away from consequences. He hung his head. You're right. You're absolutely right. Tiara looked away, blinking fast. There were nights, she whispered, when I sat on the floor with her in my arms, wondering how I was going to afford formula, or keep the heat on. And you, her voice cracked, you were probably drinking expensive wine in Paris. Roy winced. I wasn't in Paris. Kiara stared at him. Does it matter? He shook his head. No. It doesn't. Silence returned, heavy and bitter. Then Kiara asked, almost too softly, why now? Roy met her gaze. Because I saw her. And the truth blinked back at me. The next day, Roy cleared his entire calendar. He showed up with a bag of groceries and Hallie's favorite stuffed bunny, now wearing a new hand-stitched scarf. I figured Bunny needed some winter clothes, he joked, placing it in her lap. Hallie gasped and hugged it tight. Thank you. Tiara raised a brow. You sew now. Latasha gave me a tutorial. Tiara couldn't help the smirk that tugged at her lips. Roy looked at her. I want to earn your trust, Tiara. I don't expect to just be welcomed in. Tiara sighed. It's not about what I expect. It's about what Hallie deserves. Days turned into weeks. Roy was consistent, patient. He picked Hallie up from daycare on Wednesdays. He learned how she liked her pancakes. He sang terribly off-key to lull her to sleep, and she loved it. Kiara kept her distance at first, watched him with suspicion. But Roy never overstepped, never forced her to talk, never brought up the past unless she did. One night, as she watched Roy paint sparkly fingernails on Hallie's tiny hands, Tiara whispered to Latasha, He's trying. Latasha nodded. And not just with Hallie. Tiara bit her lip. That's the part that scares me. Meanwhile, Andre wasn't letting Roy off easy. You really dropped the ball back then, Andre said during one of their late-night rooftop drinks. I know, but you're not that guy anymore, Roy sipped his whiskey. Sometimes I wonder if I was ever really that guy to begin with. You weren't, Andre said simply. You were just too used to people giving up. Chiara didn't. And when she finally did, that's when it hit. Roy exhaled. What if it's too late? Then you keep showing up until it's not. But things were never going to stay simple. One sunny Saturday, as Roy helped Chiara assemble Hallie's toy kitchen set in the living room, the doorbell rang. Chiara opened it to find a tall woman in a sleek red coat, lips curled in that smug way only enemies wear. Edna. Well, well, Edna sneered. Looks like the rumors were true. Roy jumped up. Edna, what the hell are you doing here? I had a brunch reservation across the street and thought I'd drop in. She looked around the modest apartment. Cute place. Very middle class. Chiara clenched her fists. You have no right. I have every right, Edna interrupted, her tone icy. You think he's going to throw away his empire for you? For a child he didn't even know existed. Roy stepped between them. Leave. Edna narrowed her eyes. You think this ends in happily ever after? Please. You're one paternity test away from public disgrace. I already took the test, Roy replied. She's mine. And you think the board won't blink when they find out? I don't care, he said, steel in his voice. If they fire me, I'll start over. But I'm not losing them again. Chiara's breath hitched. Edna laughed bitterly. You've really lost your mind. Roy smiled. No. I finally found my heart. That evening, Roy sat on the floor of Hallie's bedroom, head leaned back against the bed. She's going to make our lives hell, he muttered. Chiara folded a blanket. You're the one with a reputation to protect. I don't care about that anymore. Chiara turned to him, brows furrowed. You say that now. But what happens when it all falls apart? Roy stood, walked toward her. If it all falls apart, I'll be standing next to you. Not behind, not in the shadows. Next to you. Chiara held his gaze. And for the first time in years, she believed him. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, just a gold-embossed seal from a law firm. Chiara opened it slowly. Inside, a formal request for shared custody, filed by Roy Wentworth. Her knees buckled. Latasha ran to her side. Chiara, what is it? Chiara held up the document. He promised. She flipped to the second page. A handwritten note fell out. I'm not filing this to take her from you. I'm filing it to protect her, so that no one, not Edna, not the press, not my board, can ever touch what we've built. I want to share this with you, fully, legally, emotionally. Please don't shut me out. Roy, tears spilled over her cheeks. I don't know how to let someone love me like that, Chiara whispered. Latasha squeezed her hand. Then start by letting him try. That night, Chiara stood at the park bench where it had all begun. The same bench where Roy first handed her that Neruda book. The same bench where they used to read aloud under the stars. Roy arrived 10 minutes later, breathless. You came, he said. I almost didn't. He looked down. I wouldn't have blamed you. Chiara pulled something from her coat, a worn paperback. 100 love sonnets. I found it again, she said. Same copy, same pages. I couldn't throw it out. Roy's eyes misted. Chiara stepped closer. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did, she said, but I don't want to keep remembering it alone. He reached for her hand. Let me carry it with you. If you've ever had to face your past to build a better future, leave A in the comments and subscribe for the rest of this story. The morning light in the new apartment danced across the kitchen tiles as the smell of scrambled eggs filled the air. Chiara stood barefoot at the counter, sipping her coffee while watching Roy, yes, Roy Wentworth, CEO of Wentworth Enterprises, struggling to braid Hallie's hair. Does this go over or under? He asked, holding a tiny section like it was a code he couldn't crack. Under, Chiara said with a smile, trying not to laugh. Roy squinted. Are you sure? I've watched 3 YouTube tutorials. Chiara took a long sip. Apparently, not enough. Hallie sat patiently in her booster seat, cheeks puffed, arms crossed. "Daddy, it looks like a messy rainbow." He chuckled. "A very fashionable one." "Maybe I'll do it myself," she declared, then jumped down and ran toward her mother's legs. Roy shrugged. "I gave it my best." Tiara tilted her head. "Honestly, not terrible." He smiled and looked up at her. "I never thought I'd get a second chance to learn how to do this." She softened. "And yet here you are." Roy's life had changed entirely. The boardroom, once his kingdom, now felt more like a distant relative he visited when necessary. The apartment filled with stock options and designer suits, a museum compared to the tiny kitchen table where Hallie told knock-knock jokes and dipped strawberries in ketchup. He now took late-night calls with one ear on Hallie's baby monitor. He stopped scheduling meetings during pickup time. He cancelled a trip to Geneva because Sierra had a cold and Hallie needed help with her class art project. The old Roy would have scoffed, but this Roy, this man learning to be a father, wouldn't trade it for anything. One afternoon, Sierra walked into the living room and stopped in her tracks. Roy sat on the rug surrounded by coloring books and stuffed animals, reading from a laminated sheet of construction paper. "What's that?" she asked. He looked up sheepishly. "A script for Hallie's puppet show." "I'm Mr. Soggy Pants the Shark." Tiara covered her mouth to keep from laughing. "You're really committing, huh?" He grinned. "Mr. Soggy Pants has range." She leaned against the doorframe and watched him, warmth blooming in her chest. This wasn't about proving himself anymore. He wasn't performing. He was present. That was the difference. Later that night, after Hallie had fallen asleep with her new puppet tucked in beside her, Sierra found Roy on the balcony, a blanket draped around his shoulders. He looked out at the city. "It's quieter from here," he said. Tiara joined him. "That's why I picked this place." Roy looked at her. "Do you think she'll ever forget that I wasn't there at the beginning?" Tiara shook her head. "Kids remember more than we think, but they also forgive faster than adults." He sighed. I missed everything. Her first steps, her first words. I missed her calling someone daddy for the first time." "She never did," Sierra whispered. "You're the first." He turned slowly. "She never called anyone else that," she said again. "Not even in her imagination." Roy blinked hard. "Thank you." Tiara stepped closer. "Don't thank me. Just keep showing up." The next few weeks brought unexpected joy. They went to a pumpkin patch where Roy, despite being allergic to hay, carried Hallie on his shoulders through a corn maze. He started volunteering on weekends at her daycare, reading books and helping with snacks. He even showed up at the parent-teacher night in a navy cardigan Sierra picked out, introducing himself as Hallie's father like it was the most natural thing in the world. Parents whispered. Teachers glanced. But Sierra held her head high, Roy's hand brushing hers in quiet solidarity. They were figuring it out, together. But progress isn't always linear. One rainy Tuesday, Roy showed up late to pick up Hallie. He looked winded, soaking wet, and panicked. Tiara met him at the daycare gate. "Where were you?" she asked sharply. "Emergency board meeting. I called. I didn't see any missed calls. I was trying to juggle 3 things. You promised you wouldn't disappear," she said, the old hurt flashing through her eyes. "I didn't disappear," he said, voice low. "I stumbled. But I came." She stared at him. "You're right," he added quickly. "No excuses. I need to do better." Sierra exhaled. She wanted to be angry. She had every right. But she saw the man in front of her, drenched, remorseful, present, and something in her heart softened. Let's just get her home. That night, Roy tucked Hallie into bed, kissed her forehead, and stayed a few minutes longer just to watch her breathe. He walked out to find Sierra making tea. "I thought I lost her today," he whispered. "Not physically, but emotionally. I saw the way you looked at me. I saw the fear. I can't ever be the man who puts that fear in your eyes again." She handed him a cup. "Then keep being the man you've been trying to be." Roy nodded. They sat on the couch in silence, drinking tea while the rain tapped against the windows. Later, Tiara looked at him. "You're not perfect. Far from it. But you're here, and I'm not going anywhere." She set her cup down. Then let's stop pretending this isn't happening. He raised an eyebrow. What isn't? She took his hand. Us? Roy's eyes widened just slightly, enough to betray the quiet hope he'd been holding on to. He leaned forward, slow and certain. Their lips met, soft and unhurried. A kiss not of desperation, but of return, of welcome, of home. The headlines dropped like hammers. Wentworth scandal, secret love child and hotel maid, revealed CEO Roy Wentworth accused of hiding daughter, damaging board credibility, sleeping with the help. Wentworth's messy private life exposed. Sierra stood frozen in the apartment kitchen, phone in one hand, article after article loading with each swipe. The photos were grainy but damning. One of her exiting the daycare with Hallie in hand, another of Roy carrying a teddy bear into their building. She didn't have to guess who leaked it. Edna. Roy burst through the door moments later, face ashen, jaw locked. I'm so sorry. Tiara looked up, her voice hollow. They called me trash, said I slept my way into your fortune. Roy stepped closer. I'm handling it. How? I already called a press conference. Today, 2 p.m. Tiara's brows lifted. Are you insane? If I don't speak, the story controls the narrative. And what narrative are you going to give them, Roy? That you fell in love with your maid, left her pregnant, and came back after 3 years because you saw your own eyes staring back. He nodded once. Exactly that. But with one correction, I'm not leaving this time. At 2 p.m., the press room buzzed like a hornet's nest. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted over one another. Roy stepped up to the podium, hands steady despite the storm in his chest. I will not entertain slander, he began. Yes, I have a daughter. Her name is Hallie. She is 3 years old and the brightest light in my life. Murmurs rippled. Her mother is Tiara, someone I failed, someone I left behind when I should have stayed, and if that makes me a flawed man, so be it. But I will not allow anyone to question their worth because of my mistakes. Flashbulbs. Furious typing. I built this company. I made sacrifices to sit here today, but no amount of power or profit will ever be worth losing the people I love again. A hush fell over the room. That evening, Tiara stood in front of her TV screen, one hand over her mouth. Latasha wiped tears from her cheeks. That man just bared his whole soul on national television. Tiara whispered, He chose us. But not everyone was applauding. Back at the company's boardroom, an emergency session had been called. Old white men in tailored suits shuffled through printed headlines. He's a liability, one muttered. Bold, yes, but reckless. The chairwoman cleared her throat. He told the truth. That counts for something, one man scoffed. In our world, truth is expensive. Roy returned home after midnight. His tie was loose, his eyes weary. Tiara waited at the kitchen island. You didn't have to do that, she said. He set down his keys. Yes, I did. They'll try to bury you. Then I'll learn to breathe underground. Tiara stared at him. I meant what I said, he continued. About you, about Hallie. You are not a secret. You are the reason I finally became a man worth something. She stepped closer. And if they ask you to step down, I'll walk out with my daughter in my arms and your hand in mine. The next morning, a message pinged on Ciara's phone. From a blocked number. You think he'll love you when the stocks drop. You're still the help. E. Tiara showed it to Roy. He didn't blink. She wants us scared, he said. I'm not, Ciara replied. He smiled. Neither am I. Later that week, the board invited Roy to a closed-door meeting. They offered him a choice. Step back quietly for 6 months. Let PR cool the fire. Or risk being voted out. Roy laughed. I'm not disappearing again, he said. But I'll take 6 months. I'll use that time to build something more important than this company ever was. They stared at him, stunned. Then someone asked, What will you build? Roy stood. A family. Back at home, he entered the apartment with a box in his hands. Tiara raised an eyebrow. What's that? He opened it. Inside, a printed certificate. Not legal, yet, but powerful. A family charter, names typed in bold. The Wentworth family, Roy, father Ciara, partner Hallie, Joy. He'd had it framed. "It's not a legal document," he said, "but it's the only one that ever mattered to me." Ciara's eyes filled. The next day, Roy took Hallie to the park. No disguises, no bodyguards, no fear. They laughed, fed ducks, chased bubbles. People stared. Some whispered. One woman even approached with a sneer, but Roy stood tall. "This is my daughter," he said calmly. "Say hello, Hallie." The woman blinked. "She's beautiful." "She is," he said proudly. "Takes after her mother." Ciara watched from the bench, heart swelling. This was redemption, not from the world's judgment, but from his own past. That evening they all curled up on the couch. Hallie nestled between them, giggling at a cartoon. Roy leaned close to Ciara. "I never thought I'd have this." She looked at him. "Neither did I." He reached for her hand. "Let's never let it go." She gripped his fingers tight. "Let's never give them a reason to doubt us again." The envelope was thick, cream-colored, embossed, too formal for casual news. Ciara found it tucked under her apartment door after an afternoon with Hallie. Her first instinct was that it might be another threat from Edna, or worse, legal backlash from Roy's company. The last few weeks had taught her that peace was never permanent. She held it in her hands for a moment, debating whether to open it now or wait for Roy to come by. But the return address, Wentworth Legal Office, Manhattan, made her chest tighten. Her palms were sweaty as she peeled the flap. Inside were 4 printed pages, bold headlines, heavy terms, custody filings, joint custody, legal visitation rights, parental designation. Ciara's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, the papers fluttering like feathers around her. Hallie ran over and threw her arms around her mother's shoulders. "Mummy, what's wrong?" Ciara could barely breathe. Her mind raced. Why now? After everything? Why legal papers? Roy arrived an hour later to find Ciara sitting on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. The open envelope lay beside her. Hallie was asleep on the couch, cradled under a throw blanket. Roy crouched beside her, instantly alert. "You saw it." She didn't look at him. "You said you wouldn't take her from me," she whispered, voice cracking. "You promised." He reached for her hand. She pulled it back. "I'm not taking her from you, Ciara. I never would." "Then why send this? Why turn us into a courtroom?" Roy's voice softened. "I'm trying to protect us. That document ensures no one, not Edna, not a board member, not a corporate lawyer, can challenge my place in Hallie's life. Or yours." Ciara finally looked up at him, eyes bloodshot. "Do you know what it feels like to wake up every day wondering if someone with more money, more lawyers, more power can just snap their fingers and take your child?" Roy swallowed hard. "Yes, I do now, and I'm doing everything in my power to stop that from ever happening." He pulled out a folded, handwritten letter. "I am filing for joint custody not because I want more control, but because I want you to know that this, what we're building, is real. This legal paper gives us structure, protection, permanency. I want us to write our daughter's story together, not in fear but in truth. Please, Ciara, don't shut me out." She stared at the letter, then at him, then closed her eyes and cried. Later that night, when the apartment had gone still and quiet, Ciara curled up beside Roy on the couch. "I was 25, she whispered. "Pregnant, alone. I kept hoping you'd call, that you'd change your mind. But you didn't, and so I learned to survive." He put his arm around her slowly, gently. "I hate that I made you do that alone." "I don't regret her," she said, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Not 1 second. But I regret letting you hold that much power over my hope." Roy rested his forehead against hers. "You never have to do this alone again." The next day, they met with the lawyer together. Ciara, in a navy blouse and jeans, hair pulled into a bun. Roy in a charcoal sweater and slacks. Professional, but united. The lawyer explained the process, shared custody documentation, Emergency contacts, co-parenting plans, school involvement. Roy turned to Ciara in the middle of it all. I'm not just doing this to be legal, I'm doing this to be present. Ciara looked at him. Then don't just co-parent. Be family. Roy nodded. Always. Over the next few weeks, Ciara noticed a shift, not just in Roy, but in herself. She no longer felt the need to micromanage his time with Hallie. She started letting go of the idea that she had to do everything on her own. She even agreed to let Roy take Hallie on their first solo father-to-daughter outing, just the two of them. They went to the museum. Roy sent pictures all afternoon. One of Hallie standing in front of a dinosaur skeleton, pointing excitedly. Another of them sharing cotton candy in the plaza. One final photo, Hallie asleep in his arms in the cab ride home, head on his chest. Ciara stared at it longer than she meant to. That night, Roy returned with Hallie curled in his arms. He placed her gently into bed, kissed her forehead, and stood in the doorway. Ciara met him in the hallway, arms crossed, lips tight. "She okay?" she asked. Roy smiled. She corrected the guide at the museum about the difference between a T-Rex and a Spinosaurus. "She's a genius." Ciara smirked. "Takes after her mother." He laughed. No argument there. They stood silently for a beat. "Thank you," she said at last. "For what?" "For letting her lead. For learning, not controlling." Roy's voice lowered. "She's teaching me how to be a father. Just like you're teaching me how to be a better man." Ciara studied him for a moment. "You're trying, and I'll keep trying. Forever. If I have to." On the first Sunday of spring, they hosted a small picnic at a nearby park. Just the three of them, plus Latasha and Andre. Hallie ran around in the grass, chasing bubbles. Latasha brought fried chicken and potato salad. Andre brought overpriced wine and dad jokes. At one point, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, Roy turned to Ciara. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "I used to think legacy was about buildings and brands. Now I know it's about bedtime stories and braids I still can't do right." She chuckled. "You'll get there." "I hope so," he said, then paused. "Because I'm in this, for good." Ciara stared into his eyes. They weren't just hazel anymore. They were full of something she hadn't seen in years, certainty. That night, Ciara sat on the couch, flipping through the pages of the custody document. She finally signed it. Not because she was surrendering her child, but because she was welcoming her future. Rain had just begun to fall, soft and cleansing, when Ciara stood outside the old library on Madison and 10th. The glass windows, slightly fogged from the change in temperature, reflected the dim street lamps behind her. In one hand, she held an umbrella. In the other, a worn paperback copy of 100 Love Sonnets. She hadn't been here in years, not since before Hallie, not since before Roy stopped being her fantasy and started being her heartbreak. But something about the soft drizzle in the air, the pull in her chest, and the way the world slowed around her made her legs move toward the library door, like memory itself was guiding her. He was already there, sitting on the steps with no umbrella, no suit jacket, just jeans, a black sweater, and the same look in his eyes he wore the first night he saw her cry over Neruda. She stepped forward. He looked up, and for a moment, neither of them said a word. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Roy finally said. "I wasn't sure you'd remember this place," she replied. He smiled, just a little. "This is where I fell in love with you." Of course I remembered. They sat on the steps, shoulder to shoulder, the sound of distant thunder pulsing behind them like a second heartbeat. "Do you know how many nights I sat here after you left?" Roy asked quietly. "Just hoping maybe you'd walk by again, or that I'd feel something that told me where to find you." Ciara looked at her lap. "You never came. I was ashamed," he admitted. "I convinced myself you deserved better than me. And when I realized that wasn't my decision to make, it was already too late." Ciara sighed. "You're not the only one who's felt guilt." He turned to her. "I spent years wondering if I should have stayed longer, if I should have waited for you to fight harder, if I gave up too quickly." Roy reached for her hand, but stopped short. "I loved you," he said. "I still do." Ciara's throat tightened. "You loved the idea of me," she whispered. "No," he said firmly. I loved the real you, the one who didn't care about my money, who told me when I was being cold, who cried in front of poetry but laughed at sitcoms, the one who made my penthouse feel like home. She looked at him, stunned by the clarity in his voice. I didn't always know how to show it, he continued, but it was always there. They sat in silence again, the rain softening around them. I signed the papers, Ciara said suddenly. Roy's eyes lit up. You did. I want us to raise Hallie together, not apart, not in fear. He placed a hand over his chest. Thank you. But there's more, she added. He blinked. I'm not doing this just for her. I'm doing it for me. Because I want peace, and because I'm still in love with you too. Roy inhaled sharply. She looked away. But if you break my heart again, I won't, he said. I swear. She turned back to him. Then make me believe that every day. Not with words, but with your life. Roy leaned in, slowly. Their lips met in the soft hush of rain and streetlight. Not a first kiss, not even a reunion, but a resurrection. The next morning, Hallie woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of her parents laughing in the kitchen. Ciara stood at the stove, flipping golden pancakes, while Roy poured orange juice into little mugs shaped like animals. Daddy's home, Hallie said sleepily, climbing onto her booster chair. Roy smiled and kissed her head. Every morning now, baby girl. That week, they did something spontaneous. They took a trip to a cabin 3 hours away, tucked between a lake and a mountain. No Wi-Fi, no emails, just them. Latasha watched the apartment while they were gone. The first night at the cabin, Hallie fell asleep early. Ciara and Roy sat on the porch under 1,000 stars, wrapped in a shared blanket. I've never felt this quiet, Ciara murmured. He looked at her. Is that a good thing? The best. They talked for hours, about books, their childhoods, what scared them, what healed them. When they went inside, Roy lit the fireplace. They sat on the rug in front of it, Ciara curled into his side. He kissed her shoulder, then her cheek, then her lips. It deepened, became slow, consuming. They moved together, like they'd never been apart. Love made manifest. No rush, no fear, only belonging. The next morning, Ciara found Roy in the kitchen making coffee. You remember how I take it? She asked. He handed her the mug. 2 sugars, almond milk. She smiled. I remember everything about you, he said. Back in the city, life moved forward, but differently. Roy stepped down temporarily from his position, true to his word. He started teaching business ethics as a guest lecturer. He built a mentorship program for young single fathers. He showed up at PTA meetings, playdates, doctor visits. Ciara enrolled in a creative writing class. For the first time in years, she started writing poetry again. One night, she shared a new piece with Roy. You were not my savior. You were my season. A storm that left sun. And I bloomed anyway. He kissed her hand. You're brilliant. She grinned. Takes one to know one. They took Hallie to visit Roy's mother, who had been estranged from him since the fallout with the board. She was shocked at first, reserved. But then Hallie said, Hi, I'm your grandbaby. And everything changed. Months passed. Their apartment grew warmer, not in temperature, but in soul. There were dance parties in the living room, pillow forts on Sundays, whispered poetry in bed. Every week, they took Hallie to the library where it all began. And every week, Ciara and Roy found new ways to fall in love again. Not with the memory, but with the now. One evening, as the sun dipped over the city, Roy brought out a small velvet box. He didn't kneel. He didn't give a speech. He just held it out and said, You already have all of me, but if you want to make it official. Ciara opened it. Inside was a simple band with 3 tiny diamonds, one for each of them. She looked at him, then nodded tearfully. Yes, it had been 4 years since Ciara walked out of Roy's penthouse with trembling hands and a suitcase full of heartbreak. Now she stood at the same door, but this time with calm in her chest, a sleepy daughter on her hip. and Roy's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. He unlocked the door. It creaked open slowly, revealing the place that once witnessed their quiet beginning and their silent undoing. Tiara stepped in. The marble floors were the same. So was the grand piano in the corner, but something had shifted. Everything felt warmer. Gone were the cold steel fixtures. In their place, soft lighting, cozy rugs, warm-toned walls, family photos framed on bookshelves, Hallie's finger paintings clipped to the fridge. Tiara's eyes welled. "It's not the same place," Roy said behind her. "It couldn't be. You changed me." She turned to him. "We changed each other." That night, after Hallie fell asleep in the princess-themed bedroom Roy had spent 2 weeks designing, Ciara emerged from the ensuite bathroom in a silk robe, ivory with tiny floral stitching along the cuffs. Roy was in the living room, shirtless, a glass of wine in hand, Neruda's book resting on his thigh. He looked up and lost his breath. "You're glowing," he whispered. Ciara laughed softly. "It's just coconut oil." "No," he said, standing. "It's peace." He took her hand, guided her to the couch, sat beside her, and pulled the book open to page 89. "I love you without knowing how. I used to think this poem was about mystery," he said. "Now, I think it's about surrender." Tiara turned to him. "I used to think love had to be loud, flashy. I thought if it wasn't intense, it wasn't real." He nodded. "But now I know. It's what's left when the noise settles. It's tea in the quiet. It's little toes under blankets. It's reading the same bedtime story 5 nights in a row." Roy kissed her shoulder. "It's you in my arms. Safe. Forgiven." She leaned her head on his chest. "It's us. Finally whole." They moved slowly, gently. Every touch was reverent. Every kiss earned. There was nothing rushed, nothing hidden. Only 2 people reclaiming the skin they once wore like armor, now turned soft under love. Their intimacy wasn't about bodies, it was about trust. And when they lay beneath the covers, tangled and quiet, Ciara whispered, "You never asked me to marry you." Roy smiled. "Because you already said yes to my life." In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into something that felt like forever. They had pancake Sundays. Hallie named the cat bubble. Latasha moved into a bigger apartment, but still came by for game nights. Andre started dating a preschool teacher and swore she was the one. And Roy, once a man whose calendar ruled him, now ruled nothing but the morning routine, the grocery list, and bedtime stories. One afternoon, Ciara sat on the penthouse balcony with her laptop. She was finally finishing her first manuscript, a book of poems titled The Quiet Between Storms. Roy brought her tea, kissed her cheek, went back inside. Later, she found a sticky note left on her keyboard. "You were the miracle I didn't know I was waiting for." One night, months after the proposal, they stood in front of a small group of friends in a candlelit rooftop garden. No white dress, no grand speeches. Ciara wore a soft pink slip gown. Roy wore a navy suit and no tie. Hallie was the flower girl, though she mostly just ate the petals. Andre officiated. Latasha cried the most. And when they exchanged vows, Roy simply said, "I almost lost the 2 most precious things in the world, your heart and her eyes. I promise to never take either for granted again." Ciara responded, "I gave you silence once. Now I give you my voice, my yes, my always." They kissed beneath a string of fairy lights, surrounded by love. Not the loud kind, the lasting kind. Later that night, back in the penthouse, Roy carried Ciara over the threshold. He set her down, laughed, and whispered, "Round 2 of page 89. She smiled. "Only if you start with breakfast in bed tomorrow." He pulled her into him. "Deal. Some truths take time to surface. Some wounds need space to breathe. But love, the real kind, waits. It grows. And if you're lucky, it finds you again. When you're strong enough to hold it." If this story touched you, drop A in the comments. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories from Mr. Charles.